I'll tell you when. Okay, so we are live, and good afternoon. I feel a little bit wiped. It's we'll be starting on right at 5:30 in a couple of seconds, maybe a minute. You look good, sir. I
Thank
thought you
you.
were gonna look all beat up.
Well, this is just normally how I look, I guess. So I think I just look beat up, and so people just assume that's just how I look normally. So
I called you last night, and right after the great victory of another masterful delivery performance by you in a well managed campaign. You're a rock star here in Pinellas County. In the Sixth Circuit, you're a rock star. You are. And I remember when you ran Judge Irizarry's campaign. She was appointed in, if my memory serves me well, historically, she was appointed by Rick Scott in 2015, August
15,
of
I
20.
believe. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. That was. And so little did she know at that time, House Representative Dwight Dudley, who was a representative at the time, he's no longer serving in the House of Representatives in Florida, but he was raising money for another term, for a third term, I believe. Yeah, and so all of a sudden, right before qualifying deadline in May of
16.
2016, yeah, he decided to run for judge and he switched. First, he filed in one group, and then he ultimately switched to that group, and it gave Judge Irizarry, who had no idea she was going to be challenged, like about 3 months to start raising monies
Well, not just to start raising money, but to keep her seat.
to keep her seat.
From a seasoned politician too.
And from a seasoned politician too, who had developed at that moment name recognition, because for the 2 terms that he was in, he ran against Frank Farkas won, and he was on that whole crusade to get Duke Energy to give the ratepayers back their money because they taxed us to
Has that
build.
ever happened?
No. I didn't think it would, but you know what? It was gonna maybe not even be done in the 8 years that they would get, because you get it's 2 years each term up to 4.
Oh, it's. I mean, Duke. I mean, that's a whole nother. That's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show. But the fact is that he established name recognition.
Oh, well, and his family is very well known as well in South Pinellas. So he has a large family, and they're teachers and firefighters and coaches. So yeah.
And then he built up the name recognition with his time in office, and then that a lot of the voters and taxpayers were mad at the fact that that nuclear plant that had been promised, and that's where the taxes were to go to, never happened. So the taxpayer got taxed for something that ultimately did not happen, and so he took that cause up and developed name recognition a lot. So it was. I'm sure I know that at the time when that had happened in 2016, when Judge Irizarry, who I was very happy about her appointment, there's a lack of diversity in the Sixth Circuit, and I would venture to guess that in a lot of the circuits throughout Florida, there's a lack still of diversity in the 21st century. So at that time when he filed to run against her, I was like, I up until that moment, I really I liked how she had been serving, so I jumped in immediately and supported her, did all I can so to help her. And I felt bad because she was only going to have like what, May, June, July, August, like 3 months
Yeah.
to establish.
Look, and she was appointed. I mean, she didn't have, the reality, she never had to run the first time. So,
Right.
She's been an attorney and she'd been a judge, and it's a whole nother ballgame to be a candidate for something.
And you knew her because you all served together in the Clearwater Bar Association.
Yeah, she was the president. Josh was president before me, but then she was just before Josh Chilson. And so,
Oh yeah, Josh is a great guy.
Yeah, so she was president of the Clearwater Bar, and so we actually had a meeting at Josh's then office, Josh Chilson's office, and we were talking, about the simple fact that she actually now has an opponent. And then the next day she called me, and
let me see if I can find the video where on the day of the the election results, I remember I was there with you all, and I got to know you better. I kind of knew you a little bit, not we'd never met. Through I sent you a couple of emails, but we never really had a chance to get to know each other. And I remember that at that time, that was your first campaign.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
It was your first campaign, and I got to know you, and I told you, look, I want to help. What can I do? And I brought her in. I interviewed her, and let me see if I can find that night when the results were coming in. It was pretty tense, right?
Oh yeah.
Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, that usually they everybody essentially tells her, oh, we'll know by 7:05, 7:15 at the latest. So, don't, make sure that everybody's had dinner. Everybody's taking care of everything by 7, because by 7:05, everybody's going to know and everybody's going to want to start to leave and blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, 7:05 happens and it's very, very close. And there was just, the precincts that started, and it took an hour at least for all of those votes to be cast, and for every, it came down. I mean, there probably was a time where we could have felt comfortable, but, the final was 1,200 votes. And really until that last precinct was counted, it was.
I kept going up to it. I was jumping all over that room because you know what?
Computers were freezing,
Yeah, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if Dwight wins, then I'm gonna have to appear before him. So I was.
Well, and two, and again, it's the way the precinct started reporting.
It looked like he was gonna win, right? Or was it neck to neck?
Well, the St. Pete precincts started to come in the day of first. And we knew that he was going to be stronger in St. Pete, and we had hoped that her, she lived in Oldsmar. She had a lot of connections in the North Pinellas, and her lead sank. I mean, it shrank to, I don't know, it was close to 500 votes, I think, at one point. And so then as the county started going more north, the precincts started reporting, and she started winning precincts. And then that lead stretched and stretched and stretched, but it was within the margin of I think he could have asked for a recount. It didn't trigger the automatic, but I think it was within that error range or whatever that he could have asked for a recount if he had wanted one. Wouldn't have changed anything, but
I remember going back and forth saying and looking at the results. I kept looking at minute by minute. And it was a very tense moment, it really was. And it was just neck to neck there until the very end when she ultimately won. And I'm going to share that because I was there. I was so pulling for her, just like, oof, tense, anxious. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share that moment because I filmed it. And I was so happy and elated that I recorded it. So let's see if we can watch this.
The next show we'll have to talk about why I don't look like that anymore. But
that's gonna be a good segment. That's when she finally found out that she'd won, and Ken Burke's there with her clerk. Yeah. That's me. I was so look at you.
Who is that?
That's you. I don't know who that is. Who is that man? That's her husband. That was your first campaign, your first ever.
Yeah.
And you know what? You did a heck of a job. You did a heck of a job. And I was very impressed with your skills at that moment.
Well, I appreciate it. It really was, honestly, that was a learning experience. And it was there was really no time to build structure. There was no time to do anything. It was like, holy crap, when's the first meeting we can go to? And where do we got to go? Like how do we get a yard sign? How do we get a palm card? How do we, and we worked with Jack Latvala. He does Golden Jaguar, right. And he was instrumental as well. And just, cause I didn't have to he helped design the mailer, the palm cards, but, and yard signs and logos and all that kind of stuff. And so, but, pulling all that stuff together in such a short period of time. And then,
what made you do that? I mean, you had no experience prior to that. None.
I have a hard time saying no. And Miriam is just such an incredible person. And it's just like the reality is, she was the first Hispanic female to sit in Pinellas County. Those are historic things that you just can't let go by the wayside. And so,
that did it for me too. When I saw that we have not even a year, the first Hispanic judge appointed,
which is crazy. It's crazy, female judge.
And then there's this, and nothing bad about Dwight, because Dwight's a good guy. He is, but he's a strong Dem at the time, and it's probably still now. And some of their values is diversity and whatnot. And so when I saw that because he originally filed in another race, and then he switched. Okay, so when he switched to that one, I thought, wow, we're gonna go after the first Hispanic female appointed in the Sixth Circuit, where diversity is lacking. So that got to me, and I said I want to help, and I liked her. I thought that she's a good judge. She's a really good judge. So, magnificent, magical. It doesn't end there, but what you did in not having any prior experience as a campaign manager, you jump on with the challenges. Dwight Dudley's name recognition. He came in with around $50,000 already in his war chest that he'd raised for
nobody told me any of this stuff beforehand. Like, I didn't have any clue who he was. I wasn't involved in politics whatsoever in our circuit, our county, our city. I had no clue who Dwight Dudley was. I had no clue he had raised money. I just was like, oh, okay, I'll do it.
No, I know. That was pretty cool.
Saying, like, I was clueless,
And you pulled it off.
We had these challenges.
With all those challenges, 3 months, you pulled it off. And it was, wow. I was very, very, very impressed. So then let's fast forward. 2018. You are then on board with another judicial campaign. Dave Ellis gets you on board to manage his campaign. That's your second under your belt. And so it was a three-way race. It was him. It was Roxanne Fixon. I interviewed Dave Ellis. You came into the studio, which I don't have anymore. I don't need it, but right? Hey, working smarter, right? You went with them. I interviewed Roxanne Fixon, and it was Don Anderson. What was his name? Dustin Anderson. Three. So then they end up in the runoff. Roxanne Fixon and Dave Ellis. And we know that when he was first on the ballot, she was second. Yes? Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Right. So, but still, the fact that she's a female, and that we understand psychologically the advantage of that. Unfortunately, sometimes it results in a good outcome, I suppose. Sometimes not so much. And so it's unfortunate, even though sometimes it works to the benefit of the community, I suppose. It's something that the voters, some voters, they pick based on gender and name. And that's, I think, a little problematic. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of reasons why people pick candidates. I mean, I think there's obviously the people who just have a difference of opinions. They actually research the candidates. They say, one has got more trial experience, one has a more varied experience, one might be more community service based, one might be, less. And so sometimes people make their judgment based on that. Sometimes it's their last name. Sometimes it's the way they look. Sometimes, if they know, No,
I know, but sometimes they go in there because
it's gender.
You understand? I started doing this a while ago, 5 to 6 years ago, because it was something that I said, this can't be. Every time hearing people, I don't know, I'm gonna guess, or just skip over those candidates. My family members, friends telling me, who do I pick? Because they had no idea. And so sometimes, yes, they go in there, they don't know. And then it's which name looks better, which name is first. Is it a male, female? That shouldn't be the reasons, the factors that the voters select who should serve on the bench, because that's a very important role in our government, in our country, in our community, state, local. So we need to make sure that we pick the best of the best. So that was your second campaign. You then hit it out of the park again, and Dave Ellis ends up winning. And so at that moment, I think you pretty much started reestablishing your reputation, that you know what you're doing, and that you have mad skills, as they say.
During Dave's campaign, I think I really learned how to do it, what are the important factors. And, I didn't come up with a lot of the stuff myself. You listen to other people, you take advice from other people who've done this. And lots of people have opinions, but you have to take that. And then of course you filter and you add your own twist on it. And I think one of my better qualities is probably just listening to other people, as far as taking their advice and not taking every single thing, but at least concepts from that. And so, but yeah, and every race is different. Obviously this year was, you develop these techniques and you have these plans and you say, this worked in Dave's race and we're going to do X, Y, and Z just like we did. And you start planning, you do all this, and then obviously the coronavirus hits and it shuts everything down. And a lot of these ideas that we had, kind of go up in smoke too.
Look,
like everybody.
You're right. And you were able to deliver a win for Dave Ellis. I believe that at that time, your name started going around town as this is the man to hire if you want to have somebody that knows what he's doing in a judicial campaign. So then Evan Freeman,
after Dave's election, Evan sent me a message and says we need to talk. So
because that election cycle, he didn't, it wasn't the result that I was very involved in that, as you know. That campaign, I was like involved, working, putting up signs. I was trying to do everything that I could for Evan. And I was so disappointed. I was there at the watch party. We talked about it yesterday when he came on it was so awesome last night to see him prevail.
But I think, the legal community really expected him to win.
That in 2018, he had everything. Tell us about that, because you know what? He had the Tampa Bay Times endorsement. He had endorsements from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. It appeared and
what they did is he did the same thing that Dave and I were trying to do, and except he was better at getting political endorsements. And so Evan had started this process. Dave waited a little while into the mix until he got in, but Evan had already been doing this for a while at that point, and so he had pretty much every elected official endorse him. Now, the reality, though, in Pinellas and Pasco County, I don't know, it might be 90% or 85% of those elected officials are going to be Republicans. And so even if you have all of the officials, you're going to look very conservative. And I think Evan came off as he wasn't attempting to be conservative, but that's how he came off, because he did what a lot of candidates do, and they say, hey, look at all these people who've endorsed me. Everybody on both sides likes me, but just because so many were one party, and that tended to rub other voters the wrong way. And
you know what?
Be concerned about perception.
He went against a female, whose name sounded like she descended from one of the founding fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something to be said about that, for sure, with the name and with the gender. And so when you compared the two, as far as qualifications, experience, he should have won based on that.
Well, and I think, so there's two issues. Obviously, there's, it's not just enough to be the best. Unfortunately, this is a game about promotion. And you have to tell everybody that you're the best. If you're not able to tell everybody that you're the best, or for them to be able to find that, it doesn't really matter if you're the best or not.
Right, and that's why I do what I do.
Last time.
That's why I do what I do, and I've been doing it for some time. Mm-hmm. Just as a civic engagement, that's my offering to the community. Like, learn. Don't just pick somebody without knowing fully, researching them, who they are, what they've done, because that's To me, that's a tragedy to select like that.
Well,
So
you have to, and from a campaign perspective too, though, you have to understand what people are willing to listen to, how to reach them, and to understand that you're only going to get a split second sometimes, or a few seconds of their time, and
right,
to try to find some way for them to engage you so that they will learn, so that they'll take
right,
a few more seconds to read a little bit more,
right,
you know?
right. And a lot of people don't like to read, Dan. And
Yeah.
Andrew Warren is in the waiting room.
All
Hi,
right.
Warren. How are you? And we have somebody you know, Andrew.
Yes.
So for those of you who are viewing, and please tell your friends, family members, we have the Hillsborough County State Attorney Andrew Warren. He's in the waiting room. He's going to come on at 6. We're going to wrap up soon with Dan. Thanks for joining me, Dan. And I wanted to bring you on because I just have incredible admiration for you. Fast forward, Evan. You said he calls you the next day after the Dave Ellis win, and he says we have to talk because then in his mind he thought I'm gonna go to try to do this again. And so now 2020,
and it wasn't. It may not have been the exact, but as soon as he was ready, as soon as he had decided he was, wanting to do it again, that's.
So I went to the watch, not the kickoff, kickoff party right before the pandemic started. I was there here in Pinellas, and I heard his speech that Evan gave, and he said that he wouldn't have even tried to do this without you. He said that. There's another candidate. There a couple of candidates that were already saying, I want you to be my campaign manager. So you are a rock star. You're a name now. If you've established that name for yourself as somebody that, and you again delivered. That's your third successful victory. You delivered. That's your third one under your belt, and you're talented. You're gifted.
And I appreciate that. And the most important thing has really been just the quality of people that I've had the opportunity to work with, and to either get elected or to stay on the bench. And it makes it so much easier to invest in yourself, because no matter what, I mean, obviously people do pay me something to help, but it's you as an attorney, I can make that money working 3 hours, instead of 50 hours in a week sometimes. I mean, it just becomes the reality that I don't do this because I'm trying to make money on this.
Chris Parker.
It's so important. All right. Thanks a lot, Chris.
It's true though. It is true. You are, and you're humble. You're a good guy. You're a good soul. You're a good man. I'm gonna bring you back on because the other thing that you did that was amazing, that some of the people might not have caught when I put a little snippet of the video of Judge Irizarry's win that evening, was you were
400 pounds.
400 pounds.
Yeah.
And look at you now, and you are a health freak. You're into exercising, staying fit, and how inspiring that is. I admire you all the more, not only because of your mad campaigning skills, the fact that you're a great human being, but now you're trying to encourage everyone to be health conscious. I want to get on that track. I want to be focused just as you are, because it's important, and more so now with our immune system, we have to keep it strong.
Well, this is for me. This is how I do this. Just like the earth is going to spin, just like the earth is going to rotate around revolve around the sun, these biological processes are going to happen to our body. If we eat the wrong things, a certain biological process is going to happen. If we exercise and we eat right, good biological things are going to happen. There's no choice. Our bodies don't have, our cells don't have little brains that get to choose whether they're going to get healthier or not. If we make the positive choices, our body has to follow the lead. Like it doesn't have a mind of its own. And so for me, that's really what it's like. I've just accepted, like, people give themselves to God or give themselves, this is what I've given myself to this idea that there's laws of nature. They work for my little Dalmatian Webster, and they're the same rules that I have to live by. And so that's for me why it's simple now, because I've just essentially accepted that. So anyway,
You know what? That's great. I want to hear more, and I want to make Florida You Judge not just like have discussions about judicial candidates or politics, social issues, social justice issues. I want to have a little bit of variety. I was talking to a couple of people that have their like life coaches or their pastors, and I want to have them on to bring in like inspiring, good, practical word to for the community to be spiritually fit, because that's important too. So to have the right mindset and attitude to be able to face challenges in life, and there are many. But I want to have you back on the one day soon so that we can talk about the nutritional things, health issues. Because what you've done is incredible. Robert Eckert today, you know that he's a good, super good friend of mine, amazing human being as well, attorney, and he talked to me this morning about you, and he said, "Man, with Dan, how he lost all that weight, amazing, incredible."
Well, the key for me now though too is just, I just eat real food. I don't go to GNC and buy some, I saw this guy coming out of there with some giant canister of protein powder, and people buy all these drinks and all this other stuff that they load into their body, and all of it's unnecessary. It took me a long time to get to where I am today eating.
Do you have a recipe book? Because you put recipes all the time of everything that you do.
I just cook. I just use the foundations of cooking, and then I just build from that. I don't do recipes really. I use them sometimes for ideas, but I don't really use them.
Well, you put out some interesting looking dishes.
Well, I'm going to try to do a cauliflower and yellow squash mash tonight.
Really?
Yeah.
You look good. I'm blessed to be able to call you friend. Seriously, you're a good man.
Same way.
I enjoy our conversation.
This doesn't happen unless we get involved in our, this is the part of this that I truly love, is just meeting in the relationships with people that I've gotten a chance to make and meet through being active in my community, and caring about what happens. And the people that I get to meet also have those same desires. And it's really, we don't always agree politically, but just.
You thought I was a little nutty at the beginning. When I reached out years ago, when I wanted to do the judicial survey, you thought,
of course. But
you thought I was a little nutty.
When people don't talk. They let their, their assumptions or their preconceptions.
And you love me now.
Mostly. Yeah, of course.
Okay, listen, I'm going to bring Andrew on. I'm going to bring him on with you here so you can say hi before we say goodnight. So, because I want to ask him a lot of questions. He's, that he's running.
Yes.
And he will be on the ballot in November. For those of you who are watching, Andrew Warren, the Hillsborough County State Attorney, he's going to come on for an hour. You can put in your questions in the comment section here, and but he is going to be on for an hour, and I'm going to ask him a good amount of questions, but I'm going to bring him on a little early.
We're not best of friends, but I do know him, and he's an incredible person. So, so I fully support him. So anybody who's in Hillsborough, I definitely would tell them.
Hi, Andrew. Can you see us?
I can.
You can? You can?
Yes, I can indeed.
Andrew, you look like you're super fit too. And you're like on a health tip and exercising. Am I wrong about that? I don't know this like you've ever told me, but you do seem like you're a fit guy.
Thank you. I'm on the COVID diet, so can't go out to eat. You order in. You have to exercise in like the closet of your home. So I don't know. It's the only way we can keep our sanity around here these days.
Yep. So in two minutes, we're going to start 6:00. For those of you who are watching, go ahead and please share this broadcast. It's very important. There's going to be a very important race in Hillsborough County between the current incumbent, Andrew Warren. He's a Democrat. He's been challenged by a Republican challenger. So you're going to see both of those names on your ballot in November. So it's very, very important that you vet the candidates and find out as much information as you can about them and what they've done, what they are saying that they're going to do. Andrew won in 2016. It was a incredible upset. Everyone was shocked in that election cycle. he came in as a virtual unknown, and he tore it up. He won, and he made a lot of pledges, and I was I challenged him. I was supporting his the incumbent at the time, and I have grown to have admiration for him. I have had an opportunity to really interact with him and to see a side of him that I didn't see when I was on the opposite side, when I was supporting the person that he challenged. But he's a humble man. He's a good-hearted man, with a family man, good father, good husband, and he's done a lot of things that can be measured. I remember when he won, I thought, because I was still a little sore about the hurt about the loss of the candidate that I was supporting that night, that I said, I'm going to see all the pledges that he made during his press releases, and I'm going to see if he's going to fulfill all of that. And I was just looking to see if and he did, and he has. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say it. It's 6:00. Dan, thanks for dropping in.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Dan, good to see you.
All right, good to see you. Hopefully I'll see you soon someday.
Sounds good.
What are the high holidays?
I'll send you the check for the positive comments.
All right, thank you.
Good night,
Right,
Dan.
have a good night, guys.
Okay, so it's 6:00. Thanks for joining me, Andrew. And this is for the benefit of the voters. I reside in Pinellas County, but I do have somewhat of a vested interest. I do practice out in Hillsborough County. I have clients there now. And even if I didn't, we should all be concerned about those persons in power, particularly the state attorney, and in all offices, because leaders, they impact our lives. So good evening, Mr. Warren. Glad to have you back again. And I'm going to just say this now. I support you. I support you. I have reached out to you. I have seen in the 4 years that you have been serving that you have fulfilled a lot of the pledges that you said made to the community when you ran. You have. And so let's just go ahead and start talking about that.
Sure. Haiti, let me thank you. I mean, from when you and I first met back in 2016, throughout, you said that you were going to make sure that I did the things I said I was going to do. You ask a lot of questions. I was
a pain in the butt.
Well, that's a good thing to be, right? We're supposed to be pains in the butt. I work for you. Well, you don't live in Hillsborough, but you do work here. So, I work for the constituents and the residents of Hillsborough County. So they should be pains in the butt to hold their elected officials accountable. And you have held me accountable. You have asked questions. You have asked difficult questions and pressed me on things. And I think we've come to a really good understanding about the things that I'm trying to accomplish, the things that we have accomplished, and what we still need to do going forward.
And I want to give you props on this. Temperament, your character, it's important. I did challenge you. I was a pain in the butt. I'm sure I would have angered people to the extent that they probably never wanted to have any dealings with me. But I'm going to say this, that even still, once you won, your office has always been very responsive. At the beginning, when I was emailing, what about this? What about that? Your office was always responsive. And at one point I said, would you come on after the creation of the Conviction Integrity Unit, which I was awaiting, which is a great thing. And we're going to talk about that tonight. But I said, could you come over and do a broadcast, an interview with me about the conviction, the Integrity Unit? And you said, yeah. And you came over here with, I forgot her name, Estella Gray. Yes, that's who it was.
Yeah,
that's who it was. So, and that was great. You were humble about it. You didn't hold a grudge or hold against me that I was hard on you and challenged you. I appreciated that. And that's one of the reasons also that I am going to support you in this race. So let's talk about one of the pledges that you made was disarming domestic abusers.
Sure.
Talk about that. You made that pledge, and so tell us about what has happened with that.
Yeah, so the background behind this is that guns and domestic violence make for a deadly combination. The presence of a firearm in a domestic abusive relationship not only increases the frequency of incidents, but the severity and the likelihood of death is 500% greater when there's a gun around. And so we didn't need to go to Tallahassee. We didn't need to go to Washington to try to get the laws changed. We realized that we could actually just aggressively and consistently enforce laws already on the books, federal law and state law, for people who have been convicted of domestic violence or who have a DV injunction against them. When they come back into the courthouse for a DV charge, that we're making sure that they're not in possession of a gun. And so essentially we just use the leverage of the system for cases where a DV case where someone is prohibited by law from having a gun, to make sure that they're not violating the law by having a gun, because we know it protects victims. It also protects law enforcement. When law enforcement's responding to a scene and they're concerned about what's going to happen in a situation where if somebody is armed, at least now there's more information about whether the domestic abuser in that situation has access to a gun, because law enforcement's asking the questions when they respond to the scene. So it's good information all around. It gives us additional leverage to take guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. It protects victims and survivors, and it encourages them to come forward by making them feel safer, knowing that they feel like we are doing everything possible to protect them.
And I'm going to go point by point on the pledges that you made when you campaigned in 2016, so that allow you the opportunity to respond to the community, how you made good on those pledges. So the next thing is you said that you were going to be involved with the development of an adult mental health court.
Right. So this is something that was already in the works when I got here. The state attorney's office had been a bit of a roadblock to this happening, but it was something that our public defender and our chief judge had been working on. And even before I was actually sworn in, I had the chance to speak with them about it. They knew that it was something that I was supportive of, and we got that going pretty quickly in 2017. To have an adult mental health court where we are solving problems. Look, I'm all about reform. I ran on a platform of reform. We've been trying to reform our system to make it more effective, more fair, more safe. This is an example of how we problem solve. When you have people come into a courthouse because they're committing crimes, not because they're bad people intent on doing bad things, but because they're suffering from, in this case, mental illness, let's treat the mental illness. If we put that person in jail or in prison and then pat ourselves on the back as if we've accomplished something, when they get out and we haven't treated the underlying problem, what's the first thing that's going to happen? We all know they go back and they do the same thing that got them there in the first place. That is such a short-sighted approach. So the adult mental health court that and it's the big we, right, state attorney's office, public defender, chief judge, with the support of our sheriff and law enforcement that we now have in place, is a great mechanism to help people suffering from mental illness get the treatment and help they need, rather
so that they
than
don't come
just
back
arresting them.
Right. And then there's also a juvenile.
Yes.
Also, not just adult, but you're focused on mental health for juveniles.
So the same stakeholders came behind the idea for a juvenile mental health court, and it's the same principle. It's shocking the number of kids we see who are suffering from mental illness that leads to them committing crimes. And it's unfortunate that we're having to solve the problems in the criminal justice system. There are better ways to do it. But when we see those cases come into the system, again, rather than just having this very short-sighted, well, they committed the crime, so we got to lock them up for as long as we can, that is not the right approach for our community, not the right approach for our loved ones and neighbors and friends who suffer from mental illness, adult or kid. So instead, we're solving problems. That's how we're reducing crime. That's how we're saving money, by making sure these people don't come back into the system. Two fantastic things that Hillsborough County can be proud of: the adult and juvenile mental health court, both established in the last 3 years.
And you keep hearing now with the criminal justice reform, and you hear it now with the school board races that we're having now. There's some runoffs, but everybody keeps talking about the school to prison pipeline, Well, you shouldn't. We're talking about children. You should treat whatever it is that's causing them to do something that might have been brought on by trauma at home. We don't know what could be impacting a child's mental health, and you're right. punishing them is not the answer.
That's right. It's about
treating them.
Treating them. Well, we want to hold them accountable.
Right.
And we also want to make sure that we're holding them accountable in a way that addresses the underlying problem. And it's pretty cool, actually, to be in one of these courts, because it's not like what you think of as a court where people are arguing and it's, I arrest my case. It's not TV. It's actually, we're all working together. The state attorney's office, the public defender, the judge. I mean, Chief Judge Figueroa comes down from the bench. He's putting his arm around people as they're getting the help, and he sees them on a path to recovery. That's the way we make sure that that person can never victimize anyone else again. Doesn't come back into the courthouse and clog our docket and waste our resources. It's a great thing that this community has. And it's an example of what happens when the leadership is all aligned in terms of their values and what we can accomplish. And
now that we're talking about the avoidance of the school to prison pipeline, we don't want to do that. We want to restore, while, yes, addressing the criminal violation, but we also want to restore to hopefully avoid a repeat. But talk about the avoidance of the arrest on juveniles in the appropriate cases, so that they don't get a record and that doesn't follow them, and to try to not get them into the school to prison pipeline.
Right. So one of the priorities from 2016 was about fixing a juvenile justice system that was dysfunctional, if not completely broken. We're just putting way too many kids into the system on the low end and even on the high end. In Hillsborough County, we were charging for a long time far too many kids as adults. We have reduced those direct files, as they're called, by 70% in 3 years, which is a huge win. Making sure that we're only putting the most serious, violent, chronic offenders into the adult system. And what you're talking about, Haiti, is this juvenile arrest avoidance program, which is really our civil citation program. And the idea behind it is simple. If you're a kid and you commit your first offense and it's a misdemeanor, what typically would happen is you go into court, you get arrested, you get charged with a crime, you get put on probation. There's sanctions that are appropriate, write a letter of apology, pay restitution. Most importantly, don't reoffend. And then if you complete your probation, great, your case is done with. The problem with that approach is twofold. One, you leave somebody with the arrest record and prosecution and potentially conviction that hangs around them and makes it harder for that kid to go to college, join the military, get a job. The other part of it is it's expensive. On average, it costs about $5,000 to prosecute a juvenile per case. So we created, working with the other stakeholders again, this civil citation program that's pre-arrest. It's really the same thing. We put that person into what's essentially probation, where they have to comply with those sanctions and not, get arrested again. But if they complete the terms, there's no charge ever filed. There's no case ever prosecuted, which means when they're answering that question, have you ever been arrested? The answer is no. We've held them accountable. We have avoided putting them into a downward spiral of the system, and we've done it in a way that saves money for taxpayers. It is a win-win-win. Prior to COVID, we were seeing about 750 to 800 kids a year going through that program here. A lot of those, what would have been arrests, were in the school. So that's how we break the school to prison pipeline. It is a hugely successful program here with a very low recidivism rate.
Awesome. And then you have the same thing for adults.
Yeah, it was working so well. We thought, well, why aren't we doing it for adults? So this was something brand new that we started back in the summer of 2017. And candidly, to my surprise, the numbers have been even higher for adults in terms of how many people are utilizing it. We're seeing about 1,200 adults a year go through that program. And it's the same concept, first-time offender. Because if you're 25 years old or 55 years old or 125 years old for that matter, and this is your first offense, and it's a misdemeanor, we don't want that one bad day to ruin your entire life. We don't want it to have the result of taking away your job, making you, be apart from your family and causing stress there. We want to hold you accountable. We want to make sure that you're not reoffending. We want to do it in an efficient way in terms of taxpayer dollars and reducing recidivism That's what the adult civil citation program does, just like the one for kids.
Great. So let's go ahead and talk about, that was one of the pledges that you made during your campaigning in 2016 that I said, okay, let's see if this happens. And I remember following up saying, when is this going to happen? Some people were sort of impatient, me included, saying, what is this? And you went ahead and you fulfilled that. Tell us about, which I think is incredible. I think every state attorney's office should have a conviction integrity unit. You pledged that you would create one, and it has been created. Tell the public about this incredible thing that every state attorney's office should have.
Yeah, and Haiti, let me start by explaining the idea behind it. Wrongful convictions are contrary to everything that our system stands for. When somebody who is innocent is convicted, not only have we convicted and locked up an innocent person, it means the actual perpetrator is still free on the streets. And this is not just something that's, in theory. We know it happens in the system. And I have sat in the room with people who are on death row for crimes that they didn't commit. And I'm not talking about they were guilty or innocent, rather, on some technicality. I mean, they actually didn't commit the crime and they were sitting on death row. And so the conviction integrity unit, or a conviction review unit, is a specialized unit within a prosecutor's office that goes back and look at questionable convictions when there's a plausible claim of innocence, which is fancy lawyer talk for saying, if we may have made a mistake and someone's pointing out to us, we have a mechanism to go back and investigate that now. The idea that if someone had come to me as the state attorney and said, Andrew, I'm innocent, or my client's innocent, or my brother is innocent, and here are the facts, and we went, oh, well, sorry, the appellate process has already run its course and not much we can do, sorry. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable.
You're right.
So these conviction review units started popping up 10, 15 years ago. By last count, there were probably 30 to 40 of them in the country. Most major cities had them. In 2016, I campaigned on the fact that we needed one here in Hillsborough County, in Tampa. We were really excited to get one started back at the end of 2018.
Okay, so you're saying right now, in 2016, when you pledged, I'm going to create this, at that time, how long had this idea and practice been occurring across the country in certain areas?
I think about 10 years at that point.
Okay.
There are a couple different offices around the country that claim to be the first one, but you really started seeing them proliferate more since in the 2010s, I guess. I mean, in the last few years, they've become more common. When I was elected in 2016, most major cities in the country had them. There were probably about 25 to 30 at the time. Now they're probably up to 40 or more. Incredible.
So it's growing. Great. In the Sixth Circuit, Bernie McCabe has not created a conviction, and I would urge him and ask him to please consider that, because you're right. It shouldn't be an issue where somebody comes and says, listen, my loved one, that person is innocent, and they're appealing to the system to please take a look at this, because I'm actually innocent. So you made good on that. Let's talk about, this is one that I handle a lot of these cases, as you probably already know, with the driving while license is suspended and no valid. Tell us what you've done with that.
So this is what I refer to as the criminalization of poverty, or sometimes called poverty traps. And again, let me just take a step back. I mean, when people think about the criminal justice system, especially non-lawyers and people who don't practice in it, they think of often what they see on TV, murderers and rapists and armed robberies and really bad people doing really bad things. And of course, that is part of the system. But we have so many people who come through the courthouse, who get into the system, not because they are bad people intent on doing bad things, but because, like we talked about, they may suffer from mental illness. They may suffer from substance abuse. And maybe they just had a really bad day, a kid doing the stupid thing that kids do sometimes. And of course, we see people get caught up in the system because they're poor. And an example, one of the most insidious examples we have is driver's license suspensions. Florida has more ways to suspend your driver's license than I think any other state in the union. And a lot of those suspensions have nothing to do with traffic safety or public safety. If you've had multiple DUIs and you get your license suspended, great, that makes perfect sense. If you've failed to pay a traffic ticket and we suspend your license, now keep in mind how this works, right? A traffic ticket in Hillsborough County can cost you $180, $200. And if you haven't paid the amount in 45 days and then 90 days, you end up with surcharges and fees. And look, you can be looking at a $400 ticket pretty quickly. 40 to 50% of America can't afford $400 in an emergency. So now you have a situation where someone who is driving to work, an otherwise law-abiding citizen, who's trying to earn the money, not just to pay off their ticket, but to keep a roof over their head and put, food on the table. And they're committing a crime because their license has been suspended. And we arrest and prosecute that person. We are creating criminals out of things that aren't really criminal conduct in the first place. So the approach we took is let's stop criminalizing poverty where we can. And this was one of the main areas where we did it. And the process behind it, the thought process behind it, is when we see people who have their licenses suspended because of a financial obligation, a financial debt that they couldn't pay. Let's solve the problem by trying to either help them pay the debt, reducing the amount that they owe. Ultimately, the goal is to help them get their license back. Now, I talk about, how people think of the system as different types of crimes than actually are in the system. When I'm out in the community, I love asking audiences, what do you think the most common crime is in Hillsborough County? And I get a variety of responses. Hey, do you probably know it's driving with a suspended license? We have like 10 to 12,000 cases a year of this out of about a 60 to 70,000 caseload a year. So this is a very common problem. We have been able to dismiss upwards of 3,000 cases a year just because we're helping people get their licenses back. So now you're having licensed drivers, which means insured drivers, which means we're not wasting court time and taxpayer resources prosecuting them. And we're letting these people get back to their life of trying to make ends meet, trying to provide for their family without trapping them in the system simply because they're poor.
And another case charge that you are seeking to do the same thing is a failure to redeliver cases. And I've defended those. Once I started practicing, went into private practice in 2007, I remember getting a good number of those. And I did well because there were things that they didn't follow per the statute, the renter centers or whatever. Right. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so there's an interesting statute in Florida. It's called failure to redeliver. And basically what it covers is when somebody has leased property or rented property and they don't return it and they're effectively stealing it. And the problem with it is that we see those cases charged, one, by the companies that actually are selling goods. So they're selling a couch or electronic equipment or furniture to somebody, and then somebody falls behind on their payments. And those companies don't even have to go through law enforcement. They could basically just file the charges, have us file the charges directly. When I got here, Hillsborough County was one of the few jurisdictions in the state that still actually prosecuted this crime. Now, there are situations where people are truly stealing from these companies, or they never have an intention of paying. They go from company to company and they're basically stealing. That's one type of case where we should be prosecuting. But in a case where someone has tried to make payments, has simply fallen behind, has a civil debt, why are we using the criminal justice system to enforce that debt?
As a collection agency, yep.
As a collection agency, right. It's unfair. It perpetuates these cycles of poverty. It is part of that criminalization of poverty that we've been talking about. And the reality is that some of these companies, again, oftentimes they're just trying to do what's right. And sometimes they continue to rent or sell to the same person and then use the leverage of the system to go after them. So when it's a situation where someone just fell behind on their payments and it's a civil debt, those aren't cases that we're prosecuting. And often because they don't even satisfy the elements of the law.
Let's talk about something that happened. You first instituted it. Was like, wow, the writer program with DUIs. I defend DUIs. A lot of my colleagues locally are private attorneys. We get those all the time. It's a regular run of the mill type charge. So tell us about the rider program and how that changed things in your jurisdiction.
Sure. So rider stands for reducing impaired driving recidivism. And this came out of the fact that Hillsborough County has led the state for a long time in some very bad metrics when it comes to DUI. DUI fatalities, DUI accidents, incidents of DUI, we're always near the top of the state. And I thought, let's try to do something different. Let's try to address the underlying problem. So the rider program is an enhanced sanction program. And what that means is anyone who's essentially a first-time DUI offender, they often would end up with a reckless driving charge based on a variety of factors, including just the volume of caseload that we have. And that's typically how these things get pled down to. And you get inconsistencies. And most importantly, we're not addressing the underlying conduct. So with a rider program, what we do is we give people these enhanced sanctions where they have to go through everything that would happen if they were convicted of DUI. They have to attend MAD's victim impact panel. They have to have an ignition or interlock device on the car. They have to do all the sanctions that are appropriate for someone who has been convicted of DUI. We launched that program in the beginning of 2018. So it's been 2.5 years now. We've put about 1,000 people through the program. You know how many people have recidivated? 2. Not 2%, 2. Out of 1,000 people who've gone through the program, that is 0.2% recidivism. When you compare that to the typical average for first-time DUI offense recidivism, which is about 5%, this is a huge reduction. And when you consider the amount of DUI cases that we have in the county every year, 3,000 to 4,000, this is a huge impact on traffic safety. So this was, again, a sort of innovative approach that we took. We kind of copied what we saw being done in a couple other jurisdictions. Palm Beach County has a similar program. We looked at similar programs from across the country. And again, we were trying to address the underlying conduct here to reduce DUI. We have MAD support behind it, which is fantastic. Our office actually won an award last year from MAD for the statewide of Florida because of this rider program. Again, it's been a huge win for public safety here. Very low recidivism rate.
Right. It's because you're not going easy on people that get stopped for and arrested for a DUI. You're actually like giving them the same thing that someone would get without the rider program. Except
correct. It's a carrot and stick approach. We're giving them the carrot of the plea offer and then the stick of these enhanced sanctions that really address the underlying conduct.
I want you to now talk about the expungement clinics. I know sometimes I get calls from people to have an expungement done because they have a prior record. And if they're eligible under Florida law, they want me, defense attorneys, to see if they're eligible to get their case sealed or expunged. Tell us about the expungement clinics that you have participated, your office, to help people do that don't know how to do it, go through the process of doing that for themselves, or it's costly. Tell us how you've done that. And you've also, in that process, you've helped veterans, service men and women to do that. Tell us about that.
So helping people transition from the system back to the community is a public safety issue, full stop, right? We know when we help rehabilitate people, when we help them with re-entry, they are far less likely to reoffend. And so what we have done with these expungement clinics goes to that goal, trying to make sure that we're helping people who can follow the law to get the record and arrests, sealed or expunged. It's often a charge that it's an arrest or a charge that doesn't result in a conviction. And the idea is pretty simple. As you said, it costs a lot of money. It's a difficult legal process to navigate. We've partnered with different organizations in the community. The Commission on the Status of Women, the Tampa Hillsborough Homeless Initiative. We've had a lot of support from the bar. Attorneys have provided legal counsel pro bono to people. And we've held, I think we did one clinic in 2018. We did 3 in 2019. Our ones in 2020 have been coronavirus stopped. But we've put a lot of people through these clinics really just to help them get those records sealed and expunged. And I'll tell you a story from one of the first clinics I was at. There was a young woman who had just graduated USF, and she was there with her father, and they went through the process, and she was in tears when it finished. And I walked up and I was talking to her, and she was explaining with her dad's arm around her shoulder that when she was a little bit younger, she had gotten in trouble with a boyfriend of hers. They tried to rob a pizza man. She was arrested at the scene. She wasn't even charged with a crime, but she was arrested for the robbery. She'd gone to USF. She'd graduated with a degree in accounting. Anytime she'd applied for a job, she was asked, have you ever been arrested? And she had to say yes and explain that she was arrested for a robbery. This was something that was going to now seal and expunge that record, help her to get on with her life. She put in the time. She invested in her education. She can be an asset to the community. We're happy to be able to play a small part in helping her to move on with her career.
That's a great story. That is a great story. And I like the fact that there's a nice balance. Your office seeks to be punitive, to address, have some consequence to when a crime is committed. But at the same time, there's a restorative, rehabilitative element layer to how you deal with cases. And so talk to me about, and the public about, persons that get caught up with drugs and drug addiction, and as a result then find themselves violating the law.
Sure. Well, Haiti, if I can, I'll go back to something you just said in the lead up to that question. I mean, you hit the nail on its head about what reform looks like, right? It starts with recognizing that we do have different types of people that come through the system. So for certain people, we do want to be tough on them. We do want to punish them. We want to do everything we can to neutralize them. I mean, if you're killing, raping, robbing people, if you're a threat to the community, I have young kids. I lie awake at night worried about the same types of crimes that everybody else does. If you're that type of criminal, yeah, we want to lock you up for as long as possible. But when you see people come through the system, again, because they're poor, because they have mental health, now we're talking substance abuse, we want a different approach than that proverbial tough on crime, lock them up and throw away the key, which only works for certain types of offenders. So when it comes to substance abuse, we have completely changed the way we're handling cases here. We are trying to take a clinical-based approach for people who suffer from addiction and abuse to make sure that they're getting the help they need. Now, we use the leverage of the system to hold them accountable where we can. You know, it's the threat of punishment that hangs over their head if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. But it goes back to something I was saying before. If you take someone who has a drug addiction and they're caught with possession of whatever, and you throw them in jail for 3 months, and then we pat ourselves on the back, hey, we got a conviction out of it, and we got 6 months of jail time. What happens when that person gets out?
Crime.
I ask my prosecutors here, how do you feel if somebody that you've convicted gets out and commits a crime? Because you should feel like we as a system did something wrong. We should be trying to reduce crime. So when we see somebody reoffend, it's a problem with the system. Now, it doesn't mean we actually made a mistake, not necessarily, but we should be trying to prevent that. So rather than just putting that person who's addicted into jail for 6 months and then hoping that when they get out, they're magically not going to be addicted anymore, we try to treat them. We have a drug court. We have different avenues we can do to get people the treatment that they need, all with the goal of holding them accountable, making sure they don't reoffend, with a singular hope that we never see that person again in the courthouse, because that's a win. It's not the conviction. It's the never seeing the person again in the courthouse because they've never committed another crime, either because they've been locked up for the rest of their life for something that merited that, or because we have solved the underlying problem to reduce the likelihood that they reoffend.
And now I'm going to ask, and I should have asked you when we were addressing the school to prison pipeline, but this is something that's very important to me, should be important to all adults or children. But with direct files, I know that in 2016, there was proposed legislation about doing the reverse waiver. The other not too long ago, we had Julian Holt on. We were talking about the passing of Rob Mason up in Jacksonville. That was his thing. He was a champion of advocacy for juveniles. So that legislation failed. I hope that the legislature takes it up again and tries to have that pass. But that's something else that you pledged, reducing the amount of direct files of juveniles from the juvenile system into the adult court. And I think that that's great. I actually am a supporter of that, and anything that we can do to help children do a UE back onto the right track and help them instead of punishing them and loading them with charges, so that then you're going to eventually, essentially mess up their life. Talk to us about that, direct files, and what you've done to change that.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're exactly right with making sure that we don't ruin a kid's life for something that is not a serious or violent offense. And we know that a lot of kids age out of committing crimes. I mean, there are certain age groups that tend to commit more crimes. So putting people into a situation where they are more likely to commit crimes is not a really good public safety strategy. So Hillsborough County had been a national outlier, and the state of Florida is a national outlier, but Hillsborough had been really bad about this, of overcharging kids as adults. And we had been overcharging kids as adults, not just for the most violent and serious offenses, not just for the most chronic offenders, but we'd often been doing it for nonviolent offenses. And that's just that violates juvenile justice 101. So we put in a policy from the moment I got here about changing how we were going to direct file kids, when we were going to charge them as adults. We have reduced those direct files by 70% in 3 years.
Wow.
Which is fantastic. I mean, it brings us back actually under the average for the state of Florida. We are charging kids in those violent crimes where we need the range of adult sanctions to hold them accountable. What we have to keep in mind is every contact that a person has with the criminal justice system increases the likelihood of future contacts. So when we're taking a kid out of the juvenile system that is geared towards rehabilitation,
right,
and putting them into the adult system, which has no rehabilitative aspect now. I mean, it just warehouses people.
That's not good for public safety.
Yeah, that's right. It's not good for public safety. That's not what we want to be doing, except in those situations where we're like, look, he committed this violent crime. Public safety demands that even though we'd love to be able to rehabilitate this person, we don't want to take the risk, charge them as an adult, and move on from the case. So,
you've reduced the numbers with kids that are not in that category of violence, of violent
correct.
crimes.
This
That
is all through nonviolent offenses. I mean, these are drugs and burglaries. And again, we want to hold them accountable, and we can do that in the juvenile system.
Right.
Anytime we're a national outlier for something, either it's really good or it's really bad. And in this case, it was something that was really bad. So we've addressed it and we fixed it.
One of the things that I admire about you, and you're gifted and you're savvy with technology and data, and you're just a 21st century hombre. So tell us how you've used data to improve the system.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I still have to call IT for help whenever I can't get the Zoom to load.
Everybody does.
Everything's working today, so I will take that as a win. We believe in data-driven approaches. There is a shocking lack of data in the criminal justice system. And there's this quote by Mickey Mantle that I love, the famous baseball player. And Mantle said, "It's amazing how much you don't know about the game that you've been playing your entire life." And to me, that summarizes the data that we've kept in the criminal justice system. We can tell you incarceration rates and crime rates, and some offices can tell you conviction rates, but why can't offices tell you a victim satisfaction, recidivism down to, the number of years, the months, whether crime has gone up or down? Why can't we tell you how efficiently we're using resources? Why can't we tell you what programs work better than others? Why can't we identify racial disparities? These are all things that we should know. And so we have, again, from the beginning, been trying to have data-driven approaches rather than just relying on what
you can never have enough data.
Yeah, we never have enough data. And so I think it's great that the state of Florida passed a law a couple of years ago.
I'm still waiting on that. I've reached out to Chris Sprouls, who sponsored that. So he said that anytime now we should be able to take a look at that.
That's right. And I supported, I applauded Representative Sprouls when they got that passed. I think it's a great thing. The rollout has been behind the curve, and it's a resource issue. I'm pleased to, relay that actually Hillsborough County, our circuit, has been one of the, if not the best in terms of fulfilling all the requirements that we're supposed to have done, because we've been upgrading our data since the day I got here. And we also have this tremendous partnership with outside researchers. So we've been working with Florida International University in a research partnership with the MacArthur Foundation. MacArthur is the nation's largest private philanthropy. And the program is with 4 jurisdictions across the whole country. We were really happy that we got selected. And the idea is relatively simple. Let's figure out what metrics a prosecutor's office should be looking at and start keeping track of them. That's the gist of it. We want to create the blueprint for a 21st century prosecutor's office so that we're not just looking at conviction rates and crime rates, but we're looking at all these different things I talked about: charging decisions, sentencing, minimizing disparities, victim satisfaction, efficient use of resources, reducing crime, successful diversion programs, all those things that in a perfect data world we have. We're building that. We've been working with them for 2 years. The partnership was actually supposed to conclude in the second quarter of this year. The pandemic hit. It looks like now we're going to finish it in the fourth quarter of this year. But we are so happy to be part of this groundbreaking project to reimagine how to measure success in a prosecutor's office.
Tell us about legislatively. I know that the state attorneys, there's an association in the state, and that you and the public defender, you're regularly up in Tallahassee or have people up there in participating with the legislative process. Tell us what you have done and how you've been involved legislatively.
Sure. So some of the biggest things that I've been up there for have been lobbying on last year for driver's license suspensions reform. We talked about it earlier on the show about Florida has so many ways to suspend driver's license, and they're frankly much smarter ways that we can do this. And so there was a particular bill that was sponsored by a national organization, the Fines and Fees Justice Center, which has done fantastic work in other states in driver's license suspension reform to minimize poverty traps, that I was proud to lobby on behalf of. Not officially. I was just up there, weighing in on it.
Right.
But I was happy that they invited me and that, legislators were open and willing to talk about how we address that problem. I've been a big supporter of Amendment 4 and tried to work with the legislature on ways to get that, to improve that. We've lobbied in terms of the Victims' Rights Amendment, and I was an early supporter of Marsy's Law, which is the Victims' Rights Amendment that passed in 2018. And it's great that actually Hillsborough County was one of the first jurisdictions in the state to implement Marsy's Law, that we were able to create the model for other state attorneys' offices to follow and how they support victims at every single step of the process. I don't love Tallahassee, frankly. I like being here in Tampa with my family and with the office, and where I feel like I can actually do a lot more good. But when there are important issues that I feel like I need to lend my voice to, I've gone up sometimes on my own behalf, sometimes working with the other elected state attorneys, which is the FPAA, the Florida Prosecuting Attorney Association, to make sure that legislators hear our voice and hear our input on important issues that affect our criminal justice system.
This is very important. This is another thing that I was looking at. As soon as you went in, I'm going to see if he's going to keep this promise. Community engagement. You said you're going to have listening tours. I was immediately emailing saying, I want to know when, where, and you did it.
I remember you were sending a lot of emails about that. When was going to happen? And hey, Haiti, that was even before I was in office. That was still during the transition.
Because I was.
You're like,
I was still hot about the.
I haven't even gotten in the office yet.
I know, because I was still like upset about the defeat of the candidate that I was supporting at that time. But you know what you did? You You had the listening tours. Tell us about you're engaged regularly with the community. That's a good thing. When there's a leader that is not engaging with the community that they serve, that's a problem. So tell us about your community engagement.
Community engagement is so important because at the end of the day, I work for you. I mean, I work for, as I said before, the residents of the county. And I love how engaged this community is in so many different arenas. You can go and talk with neighborhood associations and Rotary clubs and whatever civic group, and they get it. They understand the economy and transportation and the environment and educational issues. But when it comes to criminal justice, it's not so clear. A lot of people, criminal justice is this foreign, unfamiliar process, and they don't really understand how it works, and they don't understand the policy. I want people to understand what we're doing. This is how we promote trust, by promoting that transparency, making sure that people understand the changes that we've made, why we're making them, what the results are. Look, we're not going to agree on everything, but you're always going to hear why I'm doing something. So to that end, we have done things like the listening tour, where we went and met with attorneys and judges and all these different groups, both in and out of the criminal justice system. We started putting out an annual report every year, which had never been done in the office before, just to highlight some of the successes, legislative, prosecutorial, policy, and frankly, the great people we have working here. We launched a community council 2 years ago to have people representing all four corners of our very large county throughout all different levels of civic engagement to come in and sort of be a mouthpiece and an earpiece for issues. We can tell people what we're doing and they can spread it to their networks, and they can bring back questions and concerns and input that's so valuable to us. And I go out and meet with, again, pre-COVID, now I just do it via Zoom, but we go out and meet regularly with all sorts of groups, from the Rotary clubs to the PTA to neighborhood associations. I want people to understand and be engaged about what's happening in our criminal justice system. It is such an important piece of our community. It's a lot of money gets spent on this. So we want to make sure that I'm being accountable to the people who put me in this position. And that's why we're so engaged.
Okay. And to end off, one of the most important things that those that you serve want to know about is, how do you save them from having to pay more taxes?
I wish I had a really good answer for that. I'm not sure. And sitting here today, I'm not the one who's
how do you seek to be a good steward of their taxes?
No, of course. I knew what you're asking. So we inherited a budget deficit in this office, and my predecessor had been really good. I mean, Mark Ober had been really good about seeing the writing on the wall. And forgive me, I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit of this, but the short of it is that when the recession hit in 2008, the state cut our usual budget and they replaced it with a trust fund. And the trust fund dollars were going down and the expenses were going up. And some offices would just use up their trust funds. And Mark was really good about saving those trust funds, knowing that the rainy day was going to come when we were going to need it. And sure enough, that started coming a few years before I got in the office. So I inherited a deficit that we had a large savings account that we could cover for a few years. The problem is the legislature 2 years now has come back and swept some of those monies. So we have been forced to actually figure out ways to cut costs tremendously. And we've done it through attrition. We haven't had to lay people off. We have simply found efficiencies in the office where we haven't rehired staff when they've left through retirement. We have cut our deficit from nearly $2 million a year down to zero. So we've been very responsible stewards with public dollars. We're facing a very tough, difficult situation now. Because of the pandemic, the legislature is estimating that our budget's going to get cut 6%. That's roughly $2 million. We have approximately a $30 million budget. And so that's a lot of money to find new savings. It took us 3.5 years to find $2 million in savings. And we're running a really tight, lean, and efficient ship here. and as we should be. But we're going to have some challenges ahead, not just in the state attorney's office, candidly for the entire state, as we deal with the economic fallout of the pandemic. But I am pleased to report that we have gone from being deep in the red to in the black here, continuing to be fiscally responsible and figuring out a way to avoid what could have been a really bad situation when the legislature swept back nearly $3 million of our trust funds over the span of a couple of years.
So it's very evident, not just talk, that you have measurably fulfilled a lot of the promises that you made to those who entrusted you with leading that office. I'm a witness of that. You just didn't talk and say something and then didn't follow through. You've actually done a lot of the things that you said that you were going to do. You've done it. And because of we've been able to smooth things over because of your character and humility, yes, because I could, again, be a pain in the butt. You have my full support. I am asking for the public. I've had an opportunity to hear your opponent. He's come on twice. And I think you're doing a great job. And so I am supporting you, sir. And I'm a registered Republican and you're a Democrat. And it doesn't matter because I look at the person and how they're serving the people, we the people, and you are doing a good job. You're nicely balancing the protection of the public with some compassion and looking to restore to prevent future crimes by people that have mental health issues, drug addiction. There's a nice balance there that I like. So you have my full support.
Thank you, Eddie. That means a lot. And I disagree with you on one thing. It's not that you were a pain in the butt. It's that, you were asking tough questions and making sure that in a position as important as this, we had someone who not just laid out a vision, but was actually seeing through that vision to fruition for what the community wanted. And I'm really proud of the success we've had. It goes way beyond me. It goes to the 300 men and women who work in this office who are, underpaid and overworked. It goes to the other stakeholders and to the community, because the entire community has embraced the idea of what you just said, of reform, of balancing things out in our system, improving our system, addressing racial disparities, finding smart solutions to solve problems. Without the community support, we couldn't have accomplished anything that we've done.
I'm sure you have a website. I just don't know the address right now. Can you let me know what that is so that I can type it out and have those who will view this, who are viewing now and will, so that they can go directly to your website and read more about you?
Sure. It's AndrewWarrenFL.com. AndrewWarrenFL.com.
Okay, let's see if that's correct.
I sure hope it is.
I do too.
And also, you can go to the state attorney's office website. I mean, we have lots of information about what the office has done.
Is that correct?
Yeah, and the state attorney's office website is SAO13th.com. That's SAO for state attorney's office, the number 13, and then the letters th.com. And lots of information for if you want to learn more about the system, about everything we've been doing here, and if you need to contact our office.
Okay, so you can learn more about Andrew Warren. Will be on the ballot in Hillsborough County in November, and he is running for a second term, another 4 years. And tell us a little bit. We have 8 more minutes. If you want to know more about him, that's the actual website for the Hillsborough County Attorney's Office, State Attorney's Office, SAO13th.com, and his own website, candidate website, AndrewWarrenFL.com. What do you have with the remaining minutes that we have as a vision for the next 4 years?
I think the most important thing that we want to do is continue doing what we've been doing. I mean, we have put a lot of good programs in place, and we want to make sure that not only do they continue to succeed, but that we improve upon them. So, I mean, we talked about the civil citation program for juveniles. Just this week, we were working with the sheriff's office and the PD and other stakeholders about revamping that to increase utilization. It's a really important goal. We talked before about how we're dealing with people who suffer from substance abuse and addiction coming into the courthouse. We changed our policy earlier this year on that. There's a long way to go to make sure that we are doing everything the way we want it to be done. You look at mental illness. Again, the mental health courts we have here are great creations, the product of collaboration with the other stakeholders. But look at what Miami's done over the past 15 years. I mean, they have really set the standard for dealing with mental illness, and they do it even before cases come into the courthouse. I mean, there's so much we need to continue doing. And one of the biggest issues, of course, is dealing with racial injustice. I mean, this is something that we've been focused on from the beginning. George Floyd's murder has brought a new spotlight to this. It has, exposed to the masses problems that have existed in the system for a very long time. And there are no simple solutions to that, but we're doing a variety of things, from going back to look at charging and sentencing decisions to make sure that we're avoiding disparities. I mentioned the work that we're doing with the MacArthur Foundation and Florida International University. We're going back with them to look at racial disparities. We're looking at a review of officer-involved shootings to make sure that we are being more transparent with the community about how those reviews occur. We are partnering with, the ACLU and the NAACP and faith leaders to address these issues. So there's still a lot of work to be done. When I came in 2016, I did have a lot of specific policies, programs. This is what we need to create. This is what we need to do. We've delivered on those promises, but of course, that's not the end of the battle. We need to continue to build on them. We need to make sure we improve the efficacy of those programs. We need to continue to solve problems. We need to make our community safer. We need to promote justice and fairness. That's my goal for the next 4 years.
Great. Well, good luck. I support you. And thank you for joining me today, particularly for the benefit of the public, the voters, so that they can hear your platform and what you've done and what you're intending to do moving forward if they entrust you for another term. Have a great night, and God bless you.
Thank you, Ada. You too.